You've heard the saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, that's the story of David and Bathsheba. David has sent his army out to do battle. He remains in the safety of the palace itself. David goes walking at night, and he looks and he sees Bathsheba, a beautiful woman, taking her bath. And the sin of lust is stirred within him. He calls her to his bedchamber, and David commits adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of one of his great commanders, Uriah the Hittite. Later he learns that she's pregnant. In an attempt to cover his sin, he calls Uriah back from the front and invites him to sleep with his wife. According to that day, they believed that if the commander had sexual relations and then went into battle, not only was his effectiveness compromised, but the presence of God and the effectiveness of the entire army was compromised. Uriah won't do it. The next night, David gets Uriah drunk and sends him back home, and once again he refuses. And now David has no place to hide, and so he sends Uriah back to the front with a note to Joab, the commander, saying, "Put him up front." And David, the shepherd boy, who defeated Goliath, David, who was close to the heart of God, compounds one sin on another, and murders a righteous man. And he almost got away with it. But God sent Nathan, who told the story of a poor man who lost his only ewe sheep. And David, in his anger as a shepherd, says the man must die. And Nathan says, "You are the man." And David's heart is broken. And Psalm 51 is the Psalm of David when the prophet Nathan came to him after he had gone into Bathsheba. And it begins, "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin." So far, so good, but listen to what happens next. "For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against you, you alone have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified in your sentence and blameless when you pass judgment." David makes no excuses. David comes clean before God. And that's confession of a righteous person. We are at a time in our lives when there are so many excuses for sin. We look at family of origin issues, and to be sure, that's real. We look at environmental realities that condition people to behave this way or that, and to be sure, there's reality there as well. But what the Bible wants to say is that sin is always ultimately a choice. Sin is the decision to live to the worst of who we are, and when we do so, we deny the best of God. Isn't it interesting? David doesn't confess a sin against Bathsheba or against Uriah, though both would be true. Doesn't confess a sin against the army, which certainly would have been true. He confesses sin against God. And White quite rightly points out that when we sin against another, it's not just that person. It's the God who cares about that person that we sin against. The next time you decide that you can be abrupt with that server at the restaurant, perhaps you remember the God of the server. The next time I'm tempted to cut in and out of traffic because I'm running late, as I sometimes do, perhaps I should be aware of the God who watches over all the others who travel as well. Sin needs to be confronted. And when confronted, owned. And when owned, it can be forgiven and we can be freed. Consequences, in fact, may need to be paid, as in the story of David and Bathsheba. But we are restored to relationship with God, relationship with others, and most profoundly, wholeness of relationship within ourselves. Happy reading.